The aircraft doors closed slowly and the cabin crew walked through the aisle making final checks. The hum of engines built under the floor, steady and strong, while passengers settled into their seats. In row 5, close to the front, a woman sat quietly. Her presence was so ordinary that no one gave her a second look. She looked like just another traveler among hundreds, head slightly lowered, eyes on the seat pocket in front of her. She held no luxury bag, wore no fancy dress, and spoke to no one, to other passengers. She was invisible, just another nobody. Yet behind her calm face, there was something she carried that no one on this plane could imagine. A secret hidden for years, a code name that once echoed across radios, a story buried deep in the clouds. The crew gave the safety demonstration. Passengers half listened. Some looked at their phones. Some leaned back to sleep. The engines roared louder, and soon the giant aircraft lifted off the runway, climbing into the blue sky. For most people, it was just another flight, hours to be passed with movies, snacks, or sleep. But for her, every second felt heavier, like she was waiting for something she could not explain. She glanced out of the window, watching the land fall away beneath the wings. Her reflection in the glass showed a face that had seen storms, missions, and choices no one around her would believe. She had once been more than this, much more. But today she chose silence, anonymity, a seat in row 5 like a shadow among strangers. The flight attendants moved with practiced smiles, serving drinks and meals. A child cried in row 12. A man argued softly with his wife in row 18. Laughter rose from a group of students in row 22. The ordinary rhythm of air travel filled the cabin. No one suspected that this quiet passenger carried memories of battles far beyond civilian eyes. Hours passed and the cabin grew calmer. The sky outside turned golden as the sun lowered. The woman closed her eyes for a moment, but her mind did not rest. She remembered voices, radios crackling, engines screaming under pressure, and the weight of decisions where seconds meant lives. She shook her head slightly, pushing the memories back into silence. She was no longer that person, not anymore. Suddenly, a faint tremor shook the aircraft. At first it felt like ordinary turbulence. The captain's voice came over the intercom, calm and practiced, telling passengers to stay seated and fasten seatbelts. The crew walked quickly through the aisles, reassuring passengers. But the woman in row 5 felt something different. Her senses sharpened, her body tensed. This was no normal turbulence. The vibrations carried a rhythm she recognized. Her eyes opened fully. Sharp and alert now, she glanced around, but no one else seemed to notice. The mother in row 4 leaned over her baby. The businessman beside her opened his laptop again. Ordinary people in an ordinary flight. She alone felt the shadow of danger. The trembling stopped, but moments later the captain's voice returned. A pause in his tone made hearts beat faster. He explained that the aircraft had developed a technical issue. Nothing to fear, he said, but his voice carried weight. The crew exchanged quick glances, their professional calm beginning to crack. The woman in row 5 sat still, breathing slowly. She knew what the captain was not saying. She had been on the other side once, behind cockpit doors, hearing alarms that passengers never heard. She could almost predict the next words, and when they came, her hands gripped the armrest. The captain's voice grew heavier. He asked for calm. He said everything was under control, but his pauses betrayed him, and then, after a long silence, his words fell through the speakers, words that made her chest tighten. "Is there anyone on board with aviation or flight experience?" he asked. Passengers stirred in surprise, some whispered, some looked around. The air grew tense, like a storm about to break. The woman in row 5 lowered her head further. Her heart pounded. Her secret life pressed against the walls she had built around it. She told herself she was done. She had left that world behind. But the captain's next words pierced through her silence like a blade. He spoke again, this time softer, almost as if directed to her alone. He used a name no one else in that cabin understood. A code name, one that had been buried in classified files. The moment the word left the speakers, the woman froze. Every memory came alive. Every secret returned. The captain had spoken her code name. The name that once saved lives in the sky. Passengers around her did not understand. They only looked confused, some laughed nervously. Some thought the captain must be joking. But she knew the weight behind that name. In that instant, she was no longer just a nobody in row 5. The silence around her broke. Her secret was no longer hers alone, and the story of this flight was about to change forever. The cabin had fallen into a strange silence. The passengers looked at one another, unsure of what the captain had just said. The words seemed to float in the air, heavy, mysterious, and out of place. But for the woman in row 5, those words cut straight into her soul. They were not just sounds, they were a call, a reminder, a summons to the past she had tried so hard to escape. Her fingers pressed into the armrest. The code name echoed in her mind like thunder. She had not heard it in years, yet it felt alive again. It was a part of her identity that no one on this plane could understand. She thought she had buried that name forever, hidden it beneath layers of normal life. But now, in front of hundreds of strangers, it had been spoken aloud. Her chest rose and fell sharply. The passengers around her whispered nervously. "What did he say?" asked the man in the aisle seat beside her, but she did not answer. She kept her gaze forward, her lips sealed. Her secret remained inside, though the fire within her had already been lit. The cabin crew moved quickly, whispering among themselves. Their polite smiles faded into lines of tension. They carried the unease in their eyes, still trying to calm passengers but unable to hide their own fear. The announcement had changed the air. The illusion of safety was cracking. The woman in row 5 tried to stay invisible, but her instincts pulled her back to life. She adjusted her breathing, counting silently, her old training surfacing without permission. The captain had not spoken her real name, but the code name was hers. Only a few people in the world had ever known it. For him to speak it now meant something bigger was happening. Then another announcement came. His voice was steady but strained. He explained the situation in vague words. A system had malfunctioned. The autopilot was unstable. The crew was working on it. His words were meant to reassure, but to her ears, every phrase revealed the truth. They were in real trouble. The passengers did not fully grasp the danger. Some prayed softly, some tightened their seatbelts. A few still believed everything would be fine. But she knew the sound of a pilot who had already run through every option. The captain's voice was not asking for help, it was reaching out in desperation. Her pulse quickened. Should she stand? Should she reveal herself? Should she risk everything she had hidden? Her mind raced back to the last time she had used that code name. Back when skies were not peaceful, when every flight could turn into a battlefield. She remembered nights of static-filled radios, her name called out as a lifeline, and the choices she made under pressure that saved lives. And now, here she was, sitting as just another traveler, a nobody in row 5. Yet fate had reached for her again. The stewardess stopped near her row. Her face pale, she leaned slightly, asking the passengers in hushed tones if anyone had aviation knowledge. Her words were the same as the captain's. Her eyes searched desperately. She was not asking casually. She was begging without showing it. The woman lowered her gaze, afraid of those eyes finding the truth inside her. But then, almost as if guided, the stewardess looked directly at her. A flicker of recognition crossed her face, not complete, but enough. Maybe it was the way the woman carried herself. Maybe the silent strength in her posture. Whatever it was, the stewardess paused longer than with anyone else. The woman's throat tightened. She could no longer pretend. The captain had spoken her name for a reason, and the crew would soon know she had been chosen before. And now, unwilling or not, she was being chosen again. She inhaled slowly, steadying herself. The moment she opened her mouth, the illusion of her ordinary life would shatter. Yet as she sat in row 5, hearing the engine strain, seeing the fear ripple through the cabin, she realized there was no choice. A sudden jolt rocked the plane. Gasps filled the cabin. A baby cried loudly. People clutched the armrests. The woman closed her eyes for a brief second, then opened them with steel in her gaze. Her secret could no longer stay hidden. The passengers might see her as a nobody, but the captain knew her code name, and soon, the entire plane would learn the truth. The story of this flight was only beginning, and she was about to step back into a role she had sworn she would never play again. The cabin lights flickered for a moment, then steadied again. Gasps and murmurs spread through the passengers. Fear was crawling slowly, climbing higher with every passing second. The woman in row 5 sat frozen, her heart pounding like it had not in years. The code name still echoed in her mind as if the captain had spoken it just now. She could no longer sit as a silent traveler, not when the aircraft trembled under stress, not when fear was growing. Her past was pulling her forward. The years of training she had tried to bury were rising again. Her hands trembled slightly, but deep inside, there was still a core of steel, a part of her that had once led under pressure. The stewardess returned, her voice hushed but urgent. She asked again if anyone had experience. Her eyes darted, scanning faces, but they landed once more on the quiet woman. It was as if something inside her knew where to look. The woman hesitated, but then she leaned slightly forward. Her voice was calm, almost too calm for the situation. "I know what the captain means," she whispered. The stewardess froze, her eyes widened. She leaned closer, whispering back, "He called you, didn't he?" The woman gave the smallest nod. That single motion carried more weight than any words. The stewardess drew in a sharp breath, relief and disbelief mixing in her face. Without another word, she hurried back toward the cockpit. Passengers noticed the exchange. Curious eyes turned toward row 5. Some began whispering, some simply stared. To them, she was just an ordinary traveler. But why had the stewardess suddenly reacted to her? Why had she whispered and hurried off? The mystery deepened and whispers grew louder. The woman kept her gaze steady ahead, though her pulse thudded in her ears. She had not wanted this, she had not asked for it. But fate had a way of finding her. She could no longer run from the name the captain had spoken. Minutes felt like hours until the stewardess returned. This time she stopped directly at row 5. Her voice carried more authority. "The captain wants to see you," she said softly but firmly. The passengers around her blinked in shock. A murmur spread. "Why her?" someone whispered. "What does she know?" another asked. But she stood slowly, her movements quiet. Almost graceful, she did not argue. She did not explain. She simply rose, leaving her seat behind. The aisle seemed longer than ever as she walked. Passengers craned their necks to watch. Some eyes were filled with hope, others with confusion. The air was heavy with questions. But no one dared stop her. She was no longer invisible. No longer just a nobody in row 5. She was someone the captain himself had called. The stewardess guided her past the curtain. Closer to the cockpit, the hum of the engines grew louder, the air thicker. The closer they came, the more she felt the weight of her past pressing down on her. She remembered long nights in dim-lit command centers, the sound of radios crackling, the urgency of choices made in seconds. Those memories were alive again. They stopped before the locked cockpit door. The stewardess tapped lightly. A moment later, the door opened, and the captain himself stood there, his face pale, sweat along his brow. Yet when his eyes met hers, something shifted. It was not just recognition, it was relief. "You came," he said softly. His voice carried exhaustion but also trust. "I didn't know if you were still alive." She stepped inside without answering. The cockpit smelled of heated electronics and stress. The co-pilot struggled with controls. Red lights flashed across panels. Warning sounds filled the small space. The situation was worse than the passengers knew. The captain gestured her toward the empty jump seat. His eyes pleaded without words. "We're losing systems," he said. "We can't stabilize. But when I saw your name on the manifest, I knew you might still be here." Her heart clenched. He had recognized her before the flight even left the ground. He had waited until there was no choice. Until the moment demanded it. She sank into the seat, hands hovering over controls she had not touched in years. The memories returned in waves, muscle memory waking, training whispering back to life. The co-pilot looked at her with disbelief. "Who is she?" he muttered. But the captain only answered with one sentence that silenced the question. "She is the reason we might still survive this flight." The cabin behind them had no idea what was happening. But a storm was building inside the cockpit, and at the heart of it was the woman from row 5 once hidden, now stepping back into the fire she had left behind. Inside the cockpit, lights blinked red. Warning chimes echoed. The co-pilot's face was pale, sweat forming at his temple. The captain turned to the woman who had just entered, a tiny spark of hope in his eyes. "We've lost hydraulic pressure," he said, voice tight. "The ailerons are slow, the flaps are unresponsive." The woman's heart dropped. But her training whispered advice. It was exactly the kind of failure she had studied, and sometimes responded to. But this was real. Much more terrible than drills. Panels glowed. Instruments danced with errors outside the cockpit windows. Clouds drifted, calm sky hiding danger. She swallowed hard, reached for a checklist. The captain frowned, hands hovering over controls. He glanced at her, asking without speaking, "Can you help me?" She nodded, though inside she tensed. She felt the weight of every life on board, each face beyond the panel. Passengers. Crews looked to them unknowingly for rescue. She took a breath, steadying her hands. "First," she said, pointing, "we need to engage manual override on flaps." Backup hydraulics and shift power to auxiliary pump. I will talk you through it, the co-pilot swallowed. Hands trembling but followed, she guided him. Step by step, her tone calm, her words precise. Pump switch on left panel. Guarded cover open. Flip it, he did. A soft click echoed. But the flaps still responded slowly. The plane shuddered as wind buffeted wings. Good, she said. Now transfer hydraulic flow to Sector B, the one that still has fluid pressure. The captain leaned in, sweat dripping, trusting her. She watched his eyes, saw the fear but also resolve. They worked together, systems toggled, alarms silenced slightly. The jump seat trembled with each control shift. Behind the curtain, the cabin felt each pulse. Passengers gripped armrests, stewards exchanged looks. Fear was no longer rumor, it was close. The woman in row 5 had left her seat in silence, but now every eye was unknowingly dancing toward cockpit. Her hands shook once, but she steadied them. Muscle memory returned. Years of secret missions, long nights under harsh lights, decisions, no second chances. All of that came alive now. In this flying shell, trying to stay aloft. Outside, the sky darkened, though no storm clouds were near. But turbulence grew, the engines groaned. She sensed other systems starting to fail. The backup comm link flickered, the autopilot disengaged. Manual control, she said sharply. Captain, switch off autopilot. Take the yoke, he did, grip strong, though unsteady. The woman coached him. Steady your pitch. Don't let it climb too steep, keep bank shallow. Wing against wind, he nodded, voice low. Working on it. Moments of terror were soft now, not loud, not explosive, but in the gentle failure of what used to be dependable, the rattling of switches, the dim glow of cabin lights, the hum of engines that strained under pressure. She turned to cockpit window, saw horizon tilt. The plane listing slightly, she corrected. Right rudder, she said. Counter drift, he did, pulling slowly, balancing. Slowly the wings leveled, though not perfectly. The flaps responded more, the hydraulics groaned less. Some control restored, enough for hope. Somewhere behind her she heard voices, the captain's deep breaths. The co-pilot's quiet thanks, but she could not look away. She guided each motion, each turn, each correction. In the cabin, passengers felt change. The fear did not vanish, but a calmness settled, as if someone had taken the storm by its core. A mother in row 7 clasped her child, closed her eyes, trusting. A man in row 12 stopped praying, stared forward, waiting. The woman from row 5 stayed focused. She was no longer invisible. She was no longer the silent traveler. She was the code name, the one the pilot had summoned, the one who could still fight the sky. The captain looked at her, voice trembling but firm. We can make it to the nearest divert airport, but we'll need to descend. Risk of structural stress until hydraulics fully respond. Her mind raced, but she nodded. Yes, descend at 1,500 feet per minute. Gear up when flaps data stable, notify ATC we have limited control. His hands worked. Radios crackled, autopilot off. All engines under strain, the plane began its descent. Wings quivering but responding. Slowly and painfully but responding. Passengers felt the change. The shift from uncertainty to purpose. The woman from row 5 felt her heart steady. Though exhaustion grounded in her bones, her spirit soared. She had answered the captain's call. She had stepped back into the cockpit of danger. And beyond the curtain, beyond the metal shell, the sky began to change its shape, not with dark clouds, but with possibility that lives might be saved. The aircraft descended slowly, shuddering with each adjustment. The passengers clung to their seats, their breaths uneven. Their fear was hidden behind silence, but their eyes darted to the front, waiting for answers. They had no idea that in the cockpit, a forgotten code name had returned to life. The woman sat steady, her hands near the controls. Guiding the captain and co-pilot, her voice was calm yet firm, like the voice of someone who had faced chaos before. The co-pilot followed every instruction without hesitation now. His earlier doubt had faded, replaced by trust. Speed stable at 290, the captain muttered, but hydraulics still weak. Altitude falling faster than we planned. She leaned forward, scanning instruments, her eyes sharp, reading every flicker. Ease the nose up slightly. Not too much, hold her steady. If you fight the descent too hard, the stress will break something. The captain obeyed. His jaw tight. The yoke trembled under his grip. Sweat lined his forehead. Yet with her guidance, the plane's nose lifted, leveling enough to slow the fall. The cabin lights flickered again. A murmur of panic swept through passengers. The attendants walked briskly, their voices steady. Though their eyes betrayed fear, they reassured families, told them everything was under control, but deep down, they knew only the mysterious woman in the cockpit stood between them and disaster. Outside, the sky deepened into twilight. The horizon glowed with fading sun. Shadows stretched across clouds. The engines hummed loudly, straining against the pull of gravity. Suddenly, the radio crackled. Air traffic control came through. "Flight 239, we see you descending." "State emergency condition?" The captain opened his mouth, but she leaned closer, whispering, "Tell them control failure. Partial hydraulics, request priority approach. No delay." He nodded and repeated her words into the mic. His voice steady but urgent. Silence followed, then ATC responded, "You are cleared priority, nearest runway ready." "Emergency crews standing by?" The woman closed her eyes briefly, relief brushing her, but only for a moment. The fight was far from over. A rough descent could still tear the aircraft apart, or worse, leave them short of the runway. She studied the co-pilot, his hands shaking slightly. She spoke gently now. "Breathe slow. Control is muscle memory. Trust the feel of the plane. Not just the numbers. Look outside, horizon steady." Her tone calmed him. His breathing eased, his grip steadied. Together they brought the nose to a smoother line. The vibrations lessened, if only slightly, behind them in the cabin. Passengers noticed the descent leveling. Some released their tight grip on armrests. Whispers turned to prayers of gratitude. Though no one knew why the plane was steadier, only row 5 stood empty, a mystery seat that no longer held a nobody. The captain glanced at her, his eyes searched her face. "You shouldn't have been here," he murmured. "And yet here you are, exactly when needed." She didn't reply. Her gaze remained fixed on the panel. Her past was not a story to share now. Her code name was not a tale for strangers. It was only a tool, useful in this moment to save lives. Minutes dragged like hours. The runway coordinates blinked on screens. The aircraft edged closer. Each mile felt endless. Each vibration a warning. Each second another test of control. Suddenly turbulence hit. The plane jolted violently. Gasps erupted from the cabin. Trays rattled, overhead bins shook. A scream pierced the silence. The co-pilot flinched, but she snapped quickly. "Hold steady, wings level, ride through it, don't fight the gust. Guide with rudder." Her command steadied them. The plane rocked but did not spiral. Slowly it leveled again. The turbulence passed. The passengers exhaled shakily, unaware that one calm voice had just held the aircraft together. The captain leaned back, breath heavy. "Runway in sight in 15 minutes, he said. "If hydraulics hold," she nodded, eyes narrowing. 15 minutes is long enough for things to fail, but also long enough for us to survive. Stay sharp. Every second counts." Her words sank into the cramped cockpit like anchors. She carried no rank, no uniform, yet her presence filled the space. The captain obeyed without question. The co-pilot followed her voice as if it were law, and still, in the back of her mind, she thought of the passengers, the families, the children crying in fear. They didn't know her face, they didn't know her name, but their fate was tied to the secret code name spoken minutes ago. 15 minutes to land. 15 minutes to keep a wounded plane alive. 15 minutes to prove that even someone forgotten in row 5 could still save hundreds. The runway was still miles away, but the aircraft carried itself like a wounded bird. Each vibration in the frame reminded the crew how fragile the situation was. The woman sat steady, her voice guiding, her presence calming. The captain and co-pilot trusted her completely now. For every correction they made came from her quiet commands. Hydraulic pressure dropping again, the co-pilot muttered, eyes flicking across the panel. She leaned forward, her brow furrowed. "Switch to manual trim. Hold the nose with steady inputs. Don't overcorrect, the plane will want to dive." "But we cannot let it." The captain gritted his teeth. Gripping the yoke tighter, sweat dripped into his collar. His eyes flicked to the window, searching for the lights of the runway. But it was still too far behind the locked door. Passengers felt every shudder. Fear spread like a wave through the cabin. Parents tightened their hold on children. Travelers whispered prayers. No one knew what was truly happening. Only that the descent felt heavy, unpredictable, and yet strangely guided by unseen hands. The radio crackled again, ATC's voice sharp. "Emergency crews in place. Fire and rescue standing by. Wind conditions stable. You are cleared straight in approach. Repeat." "Straight in approach," the captain acknowledged. His voice strained. She leaned closer, speaking low. Gear down only when flaps are safe. If hydraulics fail completely, gear might lock halfway. Wait for my call, the co-pilot nodded. Swallowing hard, his hands trembled, but her calm tone held him steady. She remembered days when young aviators had looked at her in the same way, searching for guidance, desperate for strength, and she had given it, just as she was giving it now. The aircraft shuddered again. Alarms chirped. A red light blinked on the overhead panel. Fuel imbalance, the captain muttered, panic tightening his voice. She reacted instantly. Cross-feed valves open. Balance tanks, keep weight even. If wings go heavy, control will collapse, he followed. Twisting knobs, pressing switches. The engines coughed, then steadied. A small victory, but still fragile. The co-pilot glanced at her, voice shaking. Who are you? Her eyes stayed on the instruments. Nobody, she whispered. Just someone who refuses to let this plane fall. He said nothing more, but the silence in the cockpit deepened. Every click, every beep, every breath carried weight outside. Night began to blanket the sky. City lights glimmered faintly far below. The runway was near, but still felt distant. The aircraft's descent was uneven, rocking like a tired giant. She leaned forward again, eyes locked on the horizon. Listen carefully, she said firmly. In the final approach, this plane will fight. The hydraulics may fail completely. The flaps may freeze, the gear may not lock. We must be ready for anything, the captain nodded. His lips pressed tight. His eyes burned with focus. The co-pilot straightened in his seat. His fear still there, but tempered by her calm. The woman placed her hand on the console, as if steadying the entire machine through sheer will. Remember, she whispered, a plane only flies because we believe it can. Keep believing, even when the controls resist. Her words settled into the cockpit like armor. The stewardess knocked lightly on the door, her voice shaky. Captain, passengers are asking. What should we tell them? The captain looked at the woman. Uncertain, she gave the faintest nod. Tell them this. Tell them they are not alone. Someone is fighting for them, and we will land. No matter what, the stewardess carried those words back. And when she spoke them to the frightened cabin, something shifted. Fear did not vanish, but hope entered. A child smiled through tears. An old man closed his eyes in quiet trust. Back in the cockpit, the runway lights finally appeared ahead. Tiny glowing lines in the darkness, the co-pilot gasped softly. There it is, the captain exhaled. Runway in sight, but she kept her eyes sharp. Don't celebrate yet. The hardest part is still ahead. The aircraft trembled again, systems groaning under strain, warning lights glowing angrily. The woman straightened in her seat, ready. The moment of truth was approaching in minutes. The world would know whether a forgotten code name and a hidden past could save hundreds of lives. The glowing runway stretched out like a silver ribbon in the dark. It looked close, yet for the crew inside the cockpit, it felt 1,000 miles away. The woman leaned forward, her eyes steady, every nerve focused. The aircraft rattled, metal groaning under stress. Red lights blinking on panels, final approach, the captain said. His voice low, steady, she whispered. Keep her nose aligned. Don't let the wings dip. Ride the wind, don't fight it, guide it. The co-pilot adjusted the trim, his hands trembling but controlled. Her calm voice steadied him. It was as though she had become the heartbeat of the cockpit, every pulse, every word guiding the way. The landing gear lever waited, untouched. She gave her order. Lower gear now, the captain pulled. The plane shuddered violently. A grinding noise echoed. Passengers gasped as the vibration shook the cabin. For a moment, nothing happened. Then 2 green lights blinked on the panel. Left and nose gear down, the captain muttered. Right gear. Not locked. The woman's chest tightened. A half-locked gear could collapse on touchdown, sending the aircraft skidding. She closed her eyes for half a second, then spoke firmly, cycle again once. If it doesn't lock, we land as it is. The captain obeyed. The grinding repeated, harsh and cruel at last. The third light flickered, not steady but glowing enough. Partial lock, the co-pilot whispered. It will hold, she said quietly, though inside she prayed it would. The aircraft roared closer to the ground. Runway lights grew larger. Fire trucks waited along the edges. Red and white beacons flashing. The city's night air filled with tension. In the cabin, passengers gripped hands. Silent tears on faces. No one knew exactly what was happening, but they felt the weight of it. Row 5 remained empty, yet her presence touched them all, even unseen. Speed 160, the captain called. Hold it steady, she said. Flare at the marker. Not before. Let the wheels kiss, not crash. Trust the air. The engines screamed as throttles adjusted. The plane dipped lower. Ground rushed closer. The runway lights rushed beneath. Now, she commanded. The captain pulled gently. The nose lifted, the wheels touched, a thunderous jolt shook the cabin. Baggage rattled, passengers cried out. The left gear slammed hard, then the right. The nose wheel struck last, bouncing once, then holding. Screams turned to silence. The plane skidded, sparks flashing beneath. But it stayed upright. The runway blurred under the speed. Fire trucks followed alongside. Lights flashing, brakes manual only, she ordered. The co-pilot pressed hard. The aircraft slowed, groaning like a wounded animal. At last, after endless seconds, it rolled to a halt. Engines roaring down into silence. The cabin erupted not in panic, but in cries of relief. Some clapped, some sobbed, some simply sat stunned. Lives had been spared, but none of them knew exactly how. In the cockpit, the captain slumped back, his breath heavy. The co-pilot buried his face in his hands. The woman sat still, her chest rising and falling. Her hands trembled for the first time since she had left row 5. The captain turned to her, his eyes wet. "You saved them," he whispered. "You saved all of us." "Just like before?" She shook her head slowly. "No," she murmured. "The plane saved itself. We only listened," but deep inside she knew the truth. She had stepped into the storm once more, and the code name had not been forgotten. Outside, fire crews surrounded the aircraft. Ladders rolling, emergency lights glowing. The passengers were guided out slowly, one by one, onto the runway. Their feet touched the ground with shaky gratitude. They hugged, cried, and whispered thanks to a fate they would never fully understand. Row 5 stayed empty as they disembarked. The mysterious passenger who had vanished into the cockpit did not return. To them she was a shadow, a secret, a miracle. The captain wanted to announce her name, to let the passengers know who had saved them. But when he turned, she was already walking away, slipping quietly into the night air, her figure blending with the flashing lights and darkness. She had been called, she had answered, and once again, she disappeared, just a nobody in row 5, until destiny spoke her secret name.